I am the Highland scribe, scribe to the stones, to the winds, to the bloodlines that walk unseen. Come closer, closer still. You see, the fire's warm, but this tale tonight, this tale runs wild. Now, long afore Alba bore her name, before lines were drawn in blood and ink, the land, well, the land was not ruled, but remembered. It breathed in glens and whispered in stones. The old ones say that if you listen, truly listen, you can still hear the humming and feel it beneath your feet. It was in these times where kings were not yet born, and the stars were the keepers of the law, that the travelling folk roamed the land. Now, they were people of path and firelight, never rooted, but yet never lost. You see, they kent the forests and rivers like their very own kin, and they traded stories for shelter and songs for bread. Some say that their memories are older than the cairns themselves. And among these stories is one that is often not told in full, not for the lack of belief, but because the truth, it was too heavy to carry lightly. Now, the Gleamakin'S, they werenae spirits, nor beast, nor quite men. The old ones described them as folk who lived below the skin of the land. Their eyes were green, too wide for their faces, and they shimmered like cats when the firelight caught them just right. And their skin was as white as bleached snow, cold to the touch and thin like something that was meant to stay in shadows. You see, they never caused any harm, and they didn't speak in the way of tongues like we do, but they remembered everything, long after man forgot. The Gleamakin'S, they carry it. They walked only by night, and if you heard their whistling, which was high and thin, it was said not to be really heard by the ear, but you could feel it in your jaws, then you were already too close. No one knows where their name came from, or at least in my line we don't. The Gleamakin'S, I don't know if that was a name that we called them, or it was actually the name of their tribe. You see, I'm about to tell you a story of two men, and the Gleamakin'S riddle for them. It was spring in what would later times now be called Aberdeenshire, but in that time it was nameless moorland, green and grey and soft with mist and rough with thorn, and the grass bowed low with the breath of last night's frost, and the skies bore the promise of coming rain. And in a camp nestled between two rising hills, smoke curled upward fae the morning fires, and the scent of ash and salt and rabbit fat clung heavily to the breeze. Two men stirred early that morning, Willie and Roy, both in their early years, and sons of the travelling blood and fire-warm tents. They prepared for going away to hawk. They had everything ready, and as they passed by the main fire pit, there was a circle of bairns gathered around the oldest woman in the camp, Granny Ina as they called her, and her back was bent like old willow, but her voice rang like a blackbird's cry. Oh, is I na again where bogles and hill spirits? Roy smirked. She didna stop, and she didna smile. Aye, save the tales of the gleaming goblins for the night time, eh, Granny? Willie smirked. Now she turned. Let me tell you this, laddie. There's mair in these hills than rabbits in a rain. You silly geddies. Mock the stones and it'll answer ye. Mock the shadows and they'll move. They laughed. Slightly quieter this time, though. As the day went on, it grew bitter for them. Trade in the nearest village was just completely and utterly fruitless for them. Too many things, not enough coin. The men were turned away from every croft and every cottage. By midday, they'd managed to bag themselves 2 rabbits and a pheasant. We'll be lucky to eat, never mind to trade, Roy grumbled. Aye, we'll, Willie muttered. At least we've got tea for the night. By late afternoon, a storm had began gathering in. This wasn't a soft highland mist, but more of a violent, gut-born wind that howled over the hills and lashed at the bracken sideways. As they crested a ridge, searching for a way back to camp, they saw it. A hollow in the hill, half covered by heather, yet unmistakably shaped, round and clean, carved like a waiting mouth. Willie, I hae never seen that afore. It's nae natural. The rain began lashing sideways and the wind howled sharp enough to take them off their balance. We've nae choice, Roy. And so, against every silver and sliver of good sense they had, they went in. Now, the tunnel itself was narrow and it was damp, but no wild. The walls were smooth, stone-bound, and strangely dry to the touch, despite the storm howling outside. Their torch flickered and dulled as though the air itself drank at the flames. Then it began to widen. The passage fell away into a space that was vast and still, a village of the earth. Roofs formed from braided roots and pools of water that shimmered with their own lights. The walls pulsed faintly like a heartbeat of something ancient. The men began to feel like they were not alone. And there they stood, the Gleamakin'S, watching, waiting, dozens of them, tall, silent, unmoving. Their eyes caught the faint light and flung it back, green and glowing, too wide, too knowing. Roy stumbled. Willie froze on the spot. We didn't mean you any harm, he began. A voice then entered him, not through his ears, through his very bones. You hae come again. different skins, but the same roots. They were offered no threats, no chains. Instead, they were fed the shock, but it was tasty. Broth thick with roots and stone salt, given beds shaped of moss, no fire, and yet warm. That night, the Gleamakin'S gathered, and they remembered. Once, said the eldest, your kind sang beside us. You were kent as the Sananth Ray. Ye sang to the stones, and they woke. You above, us below. Together, it was balance. But something changed. Your kind somehow learned to forget. You learned to write names and to bind songs, to crown kings. And the pact shattered. Roy leaned forward. Why are you telling us? What can we do? She stood up. Because the root has bent, but not broken. Your line carries a thread, and another thread comes, one not born of your fire, but of ink. Together they will braid the world again. She continued, as the men looked on in shock. A child shall come, the Gleamakin said, but not of a single name nor kin. Their voice will carry both fire and parchment, root and road, traveller and settled, a bloodline that should have never met, and yet somehow did. No song nor seal alone could bring the land to balance. But this braid of both, this braid just might. She turned to the lads, and the air began to grow heavy. One of the younger Gleamakin'S, a childlike one with hands like willow branches, stepped forward. This is how you will know, she whispered. This is the riddle of the blood unwritten. And she began to speak. Where water stings, O leather dyed, and mists hang low wi' mouthless cry, a child was born, fae ashen line, wi' tongue o' stone and blood o' twine. Nae cairn was raised, nae priest did bless, yet two roads met in wilderness. One bore song, wild and free, one bore ink, chained to tree. They'll write what should nae be recalled, speak names the earth once all forgot, and through their hands the fire shall return, till shadows break and tales undone. Seek the place where glen meets glade, where silence builds and roots are laid. There lies the name, the kin, the key, the braid beneath, the sun you'll see. When the storm broke, the Gleamakin'S led the two men back. There was no farewell. It was just a slow descent into silence. Willie turned and marked the path. As he turned, it was gone. There was no tunnel, no glow, only sodden bracken, wind and sky. Well, they ran back to camp and they told their tale. Not a single soul believed them. Their granny, though, she looked them once in the eye, asked them for their story, and she believed every word. Then it has started. She made them repeat the riddle over and over and over again. She carved it not in stone, but in memory, and she passed it on to the next, like the next flame in line. Now you see, I give it to you. Not a tale, not a warning, but a watching. For when the riddle is cracked, not by hand, but by heart, the world will feel it. The braid will come, and the land will breathe again. I am the Highland scribe, scribe to the stones, to the winds, to the bloodlines that walk unseen, and until the candle lights again. Sleep tight, wanderers.